So I'd like to welcome everybody here today to our workshop on the General Data Protection Regulations that have been brought in by the EU. So what is the GDPR regulations? I'm really pleased to have you all here today. And I'm also equally delighted to be welcoming Shalini Nandan to be our expert advisor on this topic today, because these laws are really, this is a new law, a new set of regulations that's been brought in by the European Union in relation to the way that we collect and manage the information of European residents. And when we're starting to talk laws, I think it's important to bring in someone who knows what they're talking about from a legal perspective. So I feel really glad that Shalini, that you're joining us today, and thank you so much for your time. Just to give you a little bit about background about Shalini before, and I'm going to throw to you, Shalini, you can add to this, but Shalini is a lawyer with more than 15 years experience in contract law. She owns her own legal business with her husband, and she operates between Australia and Fiji. So she's got a great amount of experience in international law as well as Australian law. And Shalini loves working with women entrepreneurs, which is what she's doing through her business Legally Shalini, which she established in 2015. So, Shalini, was there anything you'd like to add to this before we then get into actually speaking the Q&A today about the GDPR?
No, not really. Only that I seem to have niched down completely to working almost exclusively with solopreneurs now. Small business is in itself a big umbrella term now, and most of the people I work with, it is just them in their business. That is their reality. So I want to, applaud them whenever I can.
Absolutely, Shalini. And it's certainly, when you're coming into business and working on your own, it's just so wonderful to have someone that understands your own experience, understands your experiences as a solopreneur, and is really there in the trenches with you. And certainly that was why you came to my mind today. I thought, who's someone who really will understand this, will be able to really interpret it from a certain level, and immediately to my mind. So I really want to say thanks very much for coming on today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. So today we are talking about the GDPR. There is an urgency from a legal perspective and a list building perspective, and we'll be going today more into, today's workshop is more about the overview of the GDPR, what it's about, and then what are the implications for you before the 25th of May when the regulation comes into place and after. What I wanted to, say is that it does need attention, but it's all doable. And I've had lots of feedback this week, people saying, oh, thank heavens you're doing this workshop, and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed and so on. So that's why we're doing it, to really help you feel you're in the driver's seat with this and that you can do what you need to do. So we might just jump straight into the questions. And we're going to be talking more broadly about the GDPR in the first part of this workshop, and then we'll be moving into the actions we need to take. So my first question, Shalini, is to really ask you, what is the GDPR all about? I've given a little bit of an overview, but just would love your take on it.
Okay, so the GDPR is an acronym for General Data Protection Regulations. Back in 2016, the framework was being developed because the document prior to that was written when internet was in its infancy. So since then, in the last 5 years, the length and breadth and depth of the reach of internet and the complexities and its impact on privacy of individuals has become sort of like an animal of its own. It's become like this vine that's grown out of control. So the GDPR is essentially a response to that growth of business online and the implications that come from interacting with private individuals. The GDPR is concerned primarily, only with the personal information and privacy of people who are EU residents. So, and it's to do with any type of interaction that you have that would enable you to monitor their behavior in any way. And it's not always just their name and phone number and how they're signing up. It's also their behavior on your website, when they visit, when they leave, how long they stay. the analytics that happens with businesses that have an internet presence. So you may think that you don't have anyone on your list, but it doesn't stop there. If your website has cookies, or your SEO, etc., involves an analytics program, then you are quite possibly monitoring behavior of visitors to your site who may not leave their name and their phone number and their email address, but you can identify them through their IP address.
Mm. And I think this is a really good point, because I've been doing quite a bit of research in this space as I started preparing for this workshop. And this is a point that has not been brought up by other professionals in the area that Shalini's really highlighting, is that it's not only our mailing list, but it is our website. So what this means is that it's got implications for any of us who are basically operating any sort of business that's beyond a local business. But we'll get into that in a bit more detail in just a moment. But I guess the comment I think I wanted to make here, Shalini, is that Cambridge Analytica, that issue has thrown up this, it's almost been quite timely in terms of the EU bringing this regulation in. But we are, as you said, we're talking about laws, and the GDPR regulations run to like 250, 260 pages. So that couldn't have been drafted in that time frame. So it goes back to 2016. So in terms of then it's being more, so what this means is that it's affecting residents of the EU, but it's also affecting us as businesses outside the EU. So would you just like to explain, I guess, those different levels?
Yes, look, I really want to talk directly to everyone in this class today, in this workshop today. There is one thing that you, me, and Jen, we all have in common. We are our own gig. It's you and your website and your business and your mailing list. That's it. Okay. You cannot sit back and think that, oh, well, I'm only providing a service and all my clients to date have only been in Australia. Therefore, I do not need to comply with the GDPR. It's to do with information of people that live in the European Union states. Just to clarify, the European Union is made up of a collection of European states, about 28. The main one that concerns us in Australia primarily is the UK. Even though it's just you and your website and your service, whether you are a therapist, a social media provider, whether you offer one-on-one services for your specialty, your unique business, like, it doesn't matter. You are likely to be coming into contact with people from the EU because you all hang out in Facebook.
That's right.
Okay. Or look at the groups you hang out in. Look at who's in the groups. Look at who is coming into contact with your offers. Look at who is likely to read the feed in even in your group, Jen. If you are to look through, there are people who are present who may see your offers, who may see your freebies, your opt-ins, who are EU residents. Okay, so you've got to think of where you're positioning your business from.
That's right.
So that's the thing that I find it a kind of like a missing link in the thinking of people around the GDPR. One of the questions that I have that has come up was, what's the bare minimum I need to do to comply? I'm sorry to say this to everyone, there is no bare minimum. You can't kind of interact with people in the EU. Okay, you either are or you're not.
Yeah, you're either on or you're off.
Yeah, if you don't want to, you remove them from your list, which means monitor your list very, very regularly and remove people if you are not complying. But if you are wanting to have people on your list and you want to grow your business and it is going to be global and you are going to be helping people from around the world, including the EU and most likely the UK, then you must comply.
Yeah. And
That's it in a nutshell. I have, I cannot impress that on people enough.
And I think that's really good, Shalini, because I think there is, it's only EU residents. Like my husband said to me last night, he said, oh, well, is there something you need to worry? This is my husband. He said, do you need to worry about it? And I said, honey, I've got paying clients in the EU. It's beyond me worrying about who's on my list, but it's actually about clients. And obviously that's, people who I would like to have more clients from the EU. So that's a community that I will grow. And so I think you're right, Shalini. It is something we need to worry about. It's not about a lowest common denominator. It's actually about, let's actually embrace this. And I think that was a conversation you and I had earlier in the week. And I think the other message you gave to me was, look, it's all doable. It's just when you do.
It's all very doable. When you first started your business and someone told you have to set up MailChimp, you have to set up a list, you have to write a newsletter and start posting your freebie in your group so that you can collect people on your, on a list so that you can market to them. You have to go through this whole business of learning what MailChimp was, of working your way around, figuring out how it works, and the whole, what that whole step-by-step thing. This is no different.
Good. And I think
this is a business requirement. So it's not a matter of, oh my goodness, it's completely impossible. Depending on where, how you think about it. If you think about it as something that's going to, that is going to make business harder for you, you need to rethink that. It's like setting up your accounting system. Nobody ever wants to do that, but eventually they have to go and get one.
That's right.
If they are going to be real business people.
That's right.
So if you want to sit on the sidelines, think about it as being too hard and undoable. But if you are going to grow your business, think about it as, oh, okay, what do I need to do? Let me just get it done so that I can keep going. The other message, of course, and the important thing to remember is that it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. Just the same way as you learned your way around Xero and MailChimp and Aweber or whatever it is that you use, this is going to take time. Yeah. Some things you can outsource, some things you can do yourself.
That's right. And I think, and that's what today's all about, is like, well, let's have a look at this. Let's break it down. Let's make it step by step. Just the other thing too that you and I spoke about earlier this week, Shalini, was the fact that these regulations are in place because, as Shalini said, the EU have witnessed that the internet's growing almost like it's a vine growing up the side of a house or a building that's almost got a bit out of control. It wants to manage it a bit. But what we're talking about here is really managing people's private information. And when I started thinking about it, I thought, well, here's actually a positive in that there is a law where my private information is going to be managed in some way. So this was, for me, was about making a mindset shift instead of going, because I've heard other commentators going, oh my God, I can't stand the GDPR. I've actually thought, well, no, this is actually a real positive. It is going to help me elevate my commitment to my customers even more, my clients even more, and demonstrate that. And I think it too will be, I was talking to another colleague during the week, this is the face of things to come probably here in Australia as well. So we may as well get ourselves prepared. So, and I understand there are going to be fines. Shalini and I did talk about this. There will be fines if we don't comply. That's not
okay. So I want to have a word about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, the fines that have been stated by the regulations are, the worst case scenario. That hasn't been tested, and they are targeted in many ways to controlling the big players because they say they work it out on your annual turnover. So they're making it very, very steep for you if you have, a $1 billion turnover and 4% of it is a fine for breaching privacy laws under, privacy requirements under the GDPR. You need to be, if you come under scrutiny by the privacy commissioner in your country. So in New Zealand, it will be the New Zealand Privacy Commissioner. In Australia, it's the Australian Privacy Commissioner. In the UK, it's the Information Privacy Commissioner. You need to be showing that you are in the process of actually doing something about becoming GDPR compliant. It is a big job in a lot of ways. for the really big companies, it's a massive undertaking. For solopreneurs, it's just a little time consuming, and you need to, you know, think about, you need to have some documents in place, primarily your privacy policy, which is something that is then shared across your entire email marketing campaign. So in terms of the fines, yes, they are far and wide, and they appear crippling, but they are only going to be a problem for you if you are not seen to be complying, or attempting to comply or working towards compliance, knowing that you are marketing your business in you know, to people that are resident in the European Union. So in that way, I don't want people to be panicking because of the fines. Don't do this because of, yes, do it because it's a terrible fine, but like, do it because it's a business process. Once you tie it up and sew it up, it's done.
Exactly.
You know, and you want to give yourself the best opportunity of growing your business. For many solopreneurs who have an online business, the UK and the European Union states are a big market. So don't cut yourself off at the knees. I'm really proud of the people that are showing up to these, you know, to educate themselves about this, because, you know, these are the people whose businesses will grow. The ones that come to me and say, what's the minimum requirement? They worry me. Not because I think they'll be fined or anything like that, because I think to myself, do you want to grow your business or you want to sit on the sidelines? Make up your mind, because if you want to grow, make an effort to comply. And I'm always, you know, sometimes I feel I'm a bit blunt, but you've got to remember English is my second language. So when I was taught how to speak, it was straight to the point. The airy-fairy fluffiness, I'm sorry if that is too blunt for people, but that's how I call it as I see it.
As you see it. And thanks for that, Shalini. And I think it's true. And I think that the point you make is, and I do want to congratulate you all for turning up today, because it is, you're taking your businesses seriously, and this is a risk management, this is a customer engagement process, and it's a risk management process. And I can tell you, from what I can see they're asking us to do from an email perspective, which I'll be going into more detail on Thursday, this is the way of the future. The EU is just raising the bar now for us. And this is something we'll have to do probably for the rest of our lists. We may as well get it right now. And Judy's saying, I prefer straight to the point, so that's excellent.
Thank you, Judy.
Melody always has asked, because the 25th of May is not a hard deadline.
It is a hard deadline in that they will start monitoring.
Yep.
Meliors. It's a hard deadline in that the enforcement, the monitoring for enforcement kicks in.
Yep.
Okay, up till now there has not been any monitoring for enforcement. So from the 25th, monitoring for enforcement will kick in, and that means that if you come under scrutiny, you want to at least be able to show that, yes, I'm getting help. Yes, I have at least fixed up half my my email marketing platform and made it GDPR compliant in terms of the consent I'm obtaining. Yes, I have started, you know, I'm waiting on my privacy policy. It's here. So the investigations that have occurred during the random monitoring, they will come, because it's an incredible income source as well. Remember, it's also business for them, but it's also very important that now that they've put this in place, that in fact they do monitor it. So it is a hard deadline in that sense. To answer that question.
Let's jump into that now, because I think let's talk about what are the things we need to start thinking about May, and then after the 25th of May.
Your volume has dropped.
Oh, mine's dropped, has it?
Yeah, I think you're not speaking into your.
I will need to speak up, sorry. So I guess let's jump into, thank you for telling me that. What we need to do now is probably let's jump into what we need to do before the 25th of May, and then what to do after. I think the key thing that, though you also are hearing your face, this will be policed. And one of the things Shalini said to me earlier in the week was that, in fact, campaigns are being run in the EU where residents are basically being told, you know, your privacy, we're managing your privacy, report people who are doing the wrong thing. So they're actually, because there is a money opportunity here, they're encouraging people to report.
Well, you've also, sorry, Jen, to interrupt, you've got to understand that in the EU, they're also educating people about their new rights.
That's it.
Okay, they've got new rights now. They've got new controls over their privacy and their information. So people will be now vigilant. They will be now wondering whether they've been asked for the information in the correct way, whether they were actually given the opportunity to consent.
That's right.
And they're going to be looking at emails they're getting to see whether they actually consented properly to that. I'm not saying that everyone will do that, but what I'm saying is that's the flip side of the education that will occur with the with the implementation of a regulation as massive as the GDPR.
And I think people are going to be even more conscious of that, considering the discussion, you know, the situation around Cambridge Analytica. I mean, I don't know about any of you, but any lunches, social functions you've been to. I mean, I've been to a few different lunches and social functions where it's been a topic of discussion and people are horrified about the use of private information. So this is something that's topical, that people will actually be pleased to be given a tool to be policing the players with their information. So I don't think we can expect that. The regulation is definitely not a toothless tiger, and people in the EU will be aware of this. So let's jump in then into what we need to do. I guess there's three areas that you've sort of outlined. We've been talking about, we've been sort of circling around, Shalini. It's the website, the privacy policy.
Okay, the first thing you need to do.
May. Let's talk about before 25 May and then after 25 May.
Okay.
Knowing that I'll be going into more detail about the email stuff on Thursday. So.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, before the 25th, if you've got a list already, okay, an email marketing list or a number of lists, you need to go through it and see if you have anyone there from the EU. If you have someone there from the EU, the safest thing to do is to send them an email seeking fresh consent. And Jen can assist you to do that. She has prepared a wonderful SWOT file, or she knows what she's doing with that. I have looked at it, so I'm really pleased with it. So that's one thing. Number two, the second thing you should be doing is on your list, if there are any addresses that are unidentified, you can't tell which country they're from. So you might have an email address that is, for example, my email address is ssnandan, my personal one is ssnandan@yahoo.com. You wouldn't know where that was from at all. Okay, so anything like that where you can't identify the country that that person is from, the location, you need to contact them again via email and firstly, seek fresh consent. Invite them to your email list. Seek fresh consent and notify them that to stay on your list, there's additional information that they need to provide. It's very, very important. So that's what I would do before the 25th. And I would also look very carefully to then the other two parts of your business, which is your privacy policy on your website, number one, and then your email marketing process itself. So before 25th, if you have a list, that's what you should do. If you don't have a list, then you need to start as if the GDPR was always a thing.
Good. Just on that, and I want us to, so I think they're so just to summarize, the four things we need to do before the 25th are, if we've got an existing list segment.
I can't hear you, Jen.
Sorry, I don't know why I'm dropping off.
When you lean forward, I can hear you. I think it's a mic issue.
I'm going to stay leaning forward. So before the 25th, to summarize, if you've got an existing list, you need to segment that out to find the EU people and also anyone from unknown IP address.
Yes.
And then you get consent. as I said, I'm going to be going to this in more detail on Thursday, and I have an email swipe file prepared so that you can, you'll be able to have a look at that as an opportunity just to do that. This actually, from a customer engagement opportunity, I think Karen said over here, it's good, our list will be people who are really interested, and that's right. I'm treating this as a customer re-engagement opportunity. So I've prepared a swipe file of 7 emails, and they are just all designed, and I'm doing something specific in those emails to really re-engage people. So it's not just about, oh, could you just tick a box and get some consent? I'm actually going through that process of really re-engaging them. And I'll talk more about that on Thursday. So the same thing with your IP addresses. The third step is we've got to get the privacy policy onto the website. I would like perhaps to ask you to expand on that a bit more in a moment, Shalini. And then the email marketing process. I would, to be frank, one of the decisions I've made is I'm not going to be doing any more general email marketing between now and the 24th to the EU and the unknown IP addresses other than this re-engagement process. So after the 25th, there'll be other things that we need to do, and I'll be explaining that more on Thursday. I just want to go back to a first principles question though, Shalini, which I probably should have asked a bit earlier. The GDPR focuses on this notion that we're all data processors of European residents' information. Could you just explain for us what that means? I just think that's an important context piece I want to say.
Okay. Actually, there are 2 terms. There's data controller, data processor, and the third term, there's 3, a data owner. Sorry. The data owner is the person that owns the information. Okay? They're your subscribers. All your subscribers are data owners. The data controller is you. You are the person who has sent the email asking them to sign up to something. When they sign up, you will manipulate that information one way or another. You may do it to send them more marketing material, whatever it is, but you are the controller of the information once it's been received. So that's what the data controller does. A data processor, on the other hand, does not have control over the data. The data processor is someone like MailChimp. They get handed the data in a list, and under your instructions, they process it one way or another. And they store it and they manage it that way. So you've got to be clear in your head about where they sometimes, a marketing agency may be both. They may be data controllers and they may be data processors. Your VA, whom you hand your list over to draft, to create a landing page and manage that whole process, they are data processors. They have not been, they are not the ones that have sourced that information. Great. Is that what you meant?
Yes, that is. And I wanted that clarification. I just wanted to make sure to give that context piece. So our role and our responsibility under this regulation is as data controller. That's why it's so significant. Yes. We haven't been handed off the information. We actually are a controller of information.
Yes. So you might see in all the information out there where there are questions about whether organizations should employ or create a data processing officer, a DPO, okay? And big organizations who are controlling information, who are, getting mass subscriptions, quite possibly will need to have a DPO in their organizations. You and I, the solopreneur who's running their own gig, they just need to do the other stuff. They don't have to worry about, DPOs and all of that, but just understand your role as a data controller.
Good. And I think that's really, really good. Okay, so the next question I had then, in terms then of I think the other takeout I've had from our conversations has been that it's one thing about and I guess the thing I would like to highlight before we move on to talk about the privacy policy, because I think I'd like us to get into a bit of discussion about that today. In terms of the specifically around the fact that it's one thing to have EU residents on your list, but it's these people of unknown origin that you need to be checking for. And I guess that's a headline for me that I hadn't, with the other research I'd done, hadn't come up. And I just important for everyone who's intending to talk.
Look, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Mm.
Those people on your list that you know nothing about, like the very least, you want to know where they're from, whether they speak English, even whether they actually, it means anything to send them anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so make the effort to find out. Can I say though, if they don't respond, so you've sent, and Jen will talk to you about this later, the re-engagement process. So if you've gone through that and people have not replied, okay, so like with any other email communication, you'll send the first one, you'll send a reminder, you'll send a final reminder, okay? When you send your final reminder, you still haven't heard from anyone, you need to remove them. Okay, that's it. Just remove them. You've given them 3 goes. They don't want to be on your list. Get the hint. They haven't opened your email. They don't get to say whether they get to stay or not. You need to remove them because you have not got fresh consent. You do not know where they're from, and you have not complied with lawful purpose or proper consent under the GDPR.
And that's a good point I think you make, because those names, we have to be gone from our list by the 25th of May. So
I would strongly recommend that you cull that should be your first point. And it's a good way to start.
Yep.
You know, it's a gentle way to start. It's doable. It's easy. You look at your list, who you don't recognize, deal with them first.
Then move on. That's great.
Then
I think that's
on,
it.
yes.
So, and what I'll be talking about on Thursday is how to do that, giving you some guidelines in terms of how to do that and making that swipe file available to you as well. All right, so that's good before the 25th. So we've got to understand who's on our list, attempt to re-engage them. If they're on or they're off. And as you've said, it's, for me, the 25th, it's like, well, it's a brand new day. I then know I've got the people on my list who really want to be there. And those that don't want to, great. I've got a more, as Karen said earlier, I've got people who are really interested in my list and what I'm doing. So then after before we go then, I'd like to talk a bit about the privacy policy here, Shalini. Now, do you want to talk about that in the context of what to do after the 25th, or would you just like to talk a bit about the privacy policy and what it needs to include? Because I think this would be useful for people.
Okay, I'd like to talk about it generally first. In my work in the last almost 4 years about privacy policies, you know, it makes some people go cross-eyed. Why do they need one? In Australia, there is a general complacency because, as people have worked out, the Australian privacy principles are in no way as stringent as the GDPR. It means nothing to people with online businesses because they're not, the $3 million turnover cutoff would make it like an easy out for people. In their heads, they thought, oh, I'm a solo business. I'm never going to get there. Or I'm far away from there, so I don't have to worry about it. Good business practice requires that you have a privacy policy. So over the years, I have drafted hundreds of privacy policies for those people that want to have the privacy policies in place, knowing that they're collecting information in Australia and possibly abroad. So they would manage their information in accordance with Australian privacy principles. Now, you have to, if you are marketing outside Australia and you happen to come into contact with a resident of the EU, the GDPR supersedes the Australian privacy principles.
So we've got to be GDPR compliant.
That's right. So I have over the period of, you know, the last few months, well, actually more like the last month, I've written to my clients that I've drafted for till now because drafting a privacy policy for an Australian-based business did not include the GDPR in its scope. Now you have to include the GDPR if you are doing business online in the, you know, and coming into contact with EU residents. So let me deal with it this way. People with existing privacy policies, whether you've taken them from a template in the way deep dark past, or recently even, if you've had one custom drafted by another legal practitioner or myself, you need to now have it updated to include the requirements that the GDPR now imposes on privacy policies. And there are a few key ones. If you don't have a privacy policy and you are only going to be geographically, you're only going to be operating in a geographically restricted area, say in your local community, the chances are you do not need a GDPR compliant privacy policy. You still need a privacy policy, and the Australian privacy principles within a standard privacy policy should be sufficient. Okay, so that's the other thing. You've got to know what kind of business you're running to determine the kind of privacy policy you need. Now what I can see for the future is that if you're an online business that is providing a service or a product that is beyond your community your community boundaries, as in an Australian postcode, then you need to be GDPR compliant in your privacy policy. So that's the second thing. So if you have one already, you need to get it reviewed unless you are certain that it is already GDPR compliant. And you do that by checking in with the people that you drafted it for you or where you got it from. The second thing is, if you don't have a privacy policy, you are perfectly positioned now to get it right first up. Get one done and get a good one done that is, talks about your business, not just every single regulation in the GDPR, because not every single regulation will apply to the type of business that you have. So there is a strong recommendation that in the process of learning about the GDPR, and better business, that you customize the document for your business. Otherwise, it becomes a very lengthy, difficult document to navigate for you and for your clients, and runs the risk of meaning nothing as in hard to comprehend, but with very heavy impact should you be in breach.
That's really good. So this is a real opportunity for those of us. Yes,
absolutely.
Privacy policy in play.
Yeah. It's upgrading. It's there's all these different words for it that for us. Upgrading, up-leveling, raising the benchmark. This is part of that process. It's not just a spiritual process or an emotional process or a coaching term. This is a practical way to up-level your business.
No, I love it. And it is. And again, I mean, when I was reading through and doing some research on this, one of my questions was to you, Shalini, early on, was how different is this from Australia's privacy policy? And that it raises the bar on what we've got here in Australia. And we need to be aware of that.
Do you want me to touch on that, how different it is? Yeah. Just so that people have an understanding? Yeah. So in our privacy policy, based on the Australian privacy principles, we simply it's a quite a diluted version of the GDPR. What we don't do, which the GDPR requires, is that we have to state a lawful purpose for why we are collecting that information. And there are 6 types of legal reasons that you can use. If you don't fall into one of them and you're asking for information, you are in breach.
So those are the 6 principles, aren't they?
Yes, 2 of them I can mention now, but the class will blow out of time if I go through each one. But the 2 big ones are, there are 6. The consent is one. Consent is a separate. My cold and flu tablets are kicking in now. So of the 6 lawful purposes, there are questions that you need to ask yourself, like, what is the lawful purpose for me for asking this information from you? It could be that one of the lawful purposes is that it enables you to grow your business. But the GDPR regulations state very clearly what those 6 lawful purposes are. And for the minute, it escapes me, but I have listed them in great detail in my checklist
Perfect.
with an explanation of every one of them. So if you can download the checklist, read the 6 lawful purposes, and then you can unsubscribe. I don't care, but just make sure you go and follow it up, because I'm just not able to list them for you now. It's too much information, even for me.
Well, look, I think it is, and I think to keep everyone's engagement on this workshop, it's probably good not to have to go through each of them. But I think, again, the point we're making here is there are these 6 principles, and Shalini's checklist does cover them beautifully, and you'll be able to use that as sort of an adjunct to this workshop to really. So I really encourage you to download that. We'll give you a link for that in just a moment. So I think that is really important. I guess the other thing there is, and it's a conversation you and I've had during this week, is that as of now, as of the 15th of May, my privacy policy doesn't need to be upgraded. But from the 25th onwards, I need to be putting that process in place, don't I, Shalini?
Yes, you do. You absolutely do.
Demonstrate that I'm doing something about that.
So.
Yes. And would you say get that privacy policy updated and upgraded ASAP? Would that be your advice?
Yes, I think that in many ways it will hang over your head. The current privacy policy, if you are collecting information from European Union states, then, or dealing with it, or coming in, people are likely to visit your website for whatever reason. And the thing is, you don't know. You have to be vigilant about monitoring your list, because you never know, like you could, where people are pinging onto your website from around the world, even though you think you are not marketing there. If there is someone on your list, you are bound. Okay, so that's the other thing. So definitely, I would say make it a priority to have this tied up, maybe by the end of June, because it's really one of those things that will hang over your head, especially if you don't have a compliant privacy policy, because your current one, unless it is GDPR compliant, is not sufficient.
Okay,
there is a reason why people talk about getting your privacy policy updated. It's because your current one is not cutting it as far as being compliant with the GDPR.
That's right. And I think here I just want to make a bit of a general statement about these things. And Shalini, I think you'll be quite happy that I'm saying this, is that I've had clients come to me with their websites and there's no privacy policy, there's no terms of use, there's no disclaimer at all.
No.
And those things are really dangerous for you as business owners, because again, you're not demonstrating your position appropriately to your customers. And also there's another thing that people haven't known over the years, is that all of those elements are actually considered by Google when it's considering search engine rankings as well. So they could seem small or inconsequential, but they're actually quite significant in terms of protecting yourself, protecting your clients from a business perspective, and also even the search perspective. Again, this is not a class about those two things, but I think those two things are very important. And I would have to say that I have been quite surprised when I've had clients come to me without those things in place on their website, because they really are critical.
Yeah, I think it's coming to a point where it's just better business practice now. You have to be seen to be doing it, because prior to it was something that people overlooked. But the reality is that privacy has become such a concern now for people. And the breach of privacy, as we've seen in recent years, it's been, I think I read somewhere that 2017 was like the quintessential year of privacy disaster. There was one, the media was full of privacy breach after privacy breach after privacy breach of big organizations, banks, Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. You name it, they did it. So it's no longer like something that you just think is a bit of a luxury for your business.
It's a critical thing. It's
a critical thing now, and you can think it's a luxury. And I guess I'm still smarting from the comment about what's the bare minimum. That's the whole point of it, is that up till now, people have been getting by on what they consider to be the bare minimum. But ultimately, I don't see it as something that you need to really get in a frenzied state of fear about. It's a business process.
Yeah.
There are things to be done. Fix up your email marketing, get proper consent, make sure you have a lawful purpose, have a GDPR compliant privacy policy. That's it in a nutshell, 5, 6 things. If you do those, you're pretty much on your way home. And along the way, you will find out the reason behind this sort of stuff. At the moment, you probably don't need to know. You just need to get it into place. But once you start building it into your business processes, you'll understand why this information is, or this process is important to your business to remain sustainable in the online world.
No, that's great, Shalini. I think you're right. So in terms of, I agree with you. So in terms of then actions we take after 25th of May, so after 25 May, or from 25 May onwards, we've got to have those EU and unknown, and also the unknown IP addresses off our list. We've either engaged with them a lot, but we have to, from 25th of May, they've got to be gone. We need to have a privacy policy in place. Is there anything, I know we need to do quite a bit from an email marketing perspective, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Was there anything else we need to do specifically?
Look, if you focus on consent, getting your consent sorted for your new campaigns and for your existing list, I think that is critical. So definitely pay attention to that. For those who are new to this, make sure you use an email marketing platform that has updated to GDPR compliance. They should make it quite easy for you. You switch on a button that says turn on the GDPR compliance consent buttons, and it'll automatically embed in your campaigns. Okay, so look for that. Make sure that you go in before signing up to MailChimp or any of these. Well, MailChimp has it, but there are others for different types of businesses. So just make sure that you have that knowledge or that question running through when you are looking at these sort of things in relation to the GDPR. And yes, Judy, you're right. MailChimp was ahead of the game a long time. The second thing to start with, get your privacy policy sorted, because you will need to link your full version of your privacy policy to each one of your email marketing campaigns. So when you have your little subscription notice at the bottom, do you subscribe, yes, no, whatever, you have your notification about privacy, that you protect the information that you have provided, etc., etc. You need to link your privacy policy at that point so people can go in and have a look at your GDPR compliant privacy policy.
Absolutely. And that's the key thing. The other thing too, I would just say, and again, I'll be going into more detail about this in the workshop on Thursday, with your email, I would just say to you, please don't assume that there's just a button you can switch on. That is great if MailChimp does that, but I was sort of going through, and I use ActiveCampaign, which is a very reputable, good sort of mid-tier email service provider. And it sent me out a very detailed guide, but there are things that I have to put in place to make myself GDPR compliant. It's not just literally switching on a button. So
but what I'm saying is make sure that your email platform provider has the ability to support the GDPR requirements.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they don't. They may be missing parts of it. They haven't up-leveled yet. So just be careful about that.
That's right. And I might just talk from my own experience with ActiveCampaign. They have actually sent me a legal document that they've required me to electronically sign, which is part of their GDPR compliance activity. And then they've sent me this very detailed guide. And I won't go into that in great detail, other than to say one of the things, and Shalini, I'd love you to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty, just in terms of what we need to do with consent after 25th of May. So typically what would happen in the old paradigm was that I would prepare a lead magnet, I would send it out to you, and you'd say yes. I'd send it, make it available to you, and you would say yes. Here's my first name, here's my email address, and I'd love to have that. And then I would make an assumption, great, so you've accepted that lead magnet from me, therefore then I'm going to be able to email to you everything else, my blogs, my newsletter, my updates about my workshop strategies, my new programs, etc. That would give me effectively carte blanche approval to then email you. This is not the case under the GDPR.
No.
You will, by accepting yes to the opt-in, and the opt-in, the first lead magnet opt-in does need to say exactly as Shalini said. It needs to have a tick box that says here, yes, here's an action for you, I've read your privacy policy. And a lot of people will just tick that to get what they want, but it needs to have that button as well as the other things that we typically provide. But then, and this is where I've heard discussion from other lawyers, probably doing a 3 or 4 email nurture sequence after that would be okay. But what you actually need to do is, when you get down your sales funnel, is when you know I'm dealing, this person could be from the EU, you need to send a separate email to them that says, will you please, would you like to be on my mailing list where you'll get access to XYZ? So effectively, you've got to sell the benefits of being on your mailing list now, whereas you didn't have to before.
No, you don't have, you have to set, you are absolutely right. So the thing is, before, well, now up until the 25th, you could basically just have one opt-in. And that gave you like this whole open the gates for you to send people whatever it is that you were sending to your list. Generally, well, I know from my own experience, I only have a newsletter, actually. So people are asked if they want to subscribe to the newsletter, or if, and with this checklist, if they are okay with subscribing to my newsletter. But if you have multiple opt-ins, then each opt-in needs to be, consent has to be obtained separately for each opt-in. Yep. And there has to be sort of like a, you're right, a nurture sequence. So if there is a likelihood that without a nurture sequence, the opt-in will not be successful, people won't sign up, then you're wasting your time. So, if you need a nurture sequence, and then at the final email, close to the end of the funnel process, then you would not want to, that is the time then to nail fresh consent again.
Yep. And I'll be talking more about that on Thursday, about how we can do that. Specific steps in the funnel process that you can do that. So again, it's simple. You just need to know what to do. But that's the real thing, is we can't, and that's probably the other big takeaway we would love people to have from this workshop, is that from 25 May in the new world, we will not be able to just send out an opt-in and then merrily go and email people for the rest of the known existence. We have to get that approval to be on the list. So Melios is asking, do I need a separate consent for nurture sequence and newsletter mailing list? You need a separate, you don't need a separate consent for the nurture sequence that comes with the opt-in. The discussion we've heard is, so say the opt-in then might have 1 or 2, maybe 3 to 4 emails. I wouldn't go beyond 4 emails after that, by the way. I would only say 1 or 2 or 3. Those emails are okay to send out. But then you add, as Shalini just said, in that last email, you then nail the approval to be on my mailing list. So you may not have a newsletter.
For something else. For something else, not, so ideally you have other opt-ins. So that's the opportunity to actually get the approval for opting into other things specifically.
That's right. And to clarify, I think this is a really good point of clarification. So, for example, I don't have in my business, and I don't necessarily go with the idea of newsletters. But what I have is I make it clear in my current nurture sequence. So your current nurture sequences will also need to be addressed, which I'll talk about on Thursday. But what I have in my business is that I say to people when they currently get my opt-in, hi, thanks for coming. Here's your download. And by the way, now I'd love to welcome you to be part of my community. As part of this, you'll get access to my ad hoc updates, my blogs, information on workshops, etc., etc. And that's me basically flagging you're now going to be on my mailing list. What I'm going to have to do from 25 May, because I don't have a newsletter, but I will say you're going to be on my mailing list. What I have to do from 25 May is I have to send an email to my people from the EU or anyone of unknown IP address, and I need to say, dear Joe, would love to, you've received my opt-in on blah, blah, blah. Would love to, for you to be able to experience all of the other great things that I have on offer. To do that, I will need your consent to be on my mailing list. So I'm going to get that consent to be on my mailing list. So that is my understanding what will be lawful to do. Now, if I had a newsletter list and my next step would be to take people from there into a newsletter list, that same email, I'd need to basically say, can I have your permission to be on my mailing list?
That's right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm.
So it's the whole point of it is to make sure that just because you sign up to one list for someone, right? Just because you sign up to one opt-in does not give that business the right to send you information about all their other opt-ins.
That's right.
You need to get consent for each one.
That's right.
So if you have a mailing list and you only send one thing, that's okay. But if you send, mailing list is a big term. So you have to look at your opt-ins. You have to look and see what campaign are you doing. Each campaign needs to be treated with fresh consent.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Okay, yeah. Each campaign, one campaign, fresh consent. Different campaign, another fresh consent.
And I think that will just become part of the opt-in process. That first page will have that.
Yes.
Okay. So Melios is asking some good questions here. So do I need a separate list? She says, I have 5 opt-ins and my nurture sequences are 5 emails long. Well, each of those is going to have to ask for a consent if those people are in the EU, and a weekly email to my main list of 1,200. Likewise, that weekly email newsletter list will need consent from people from the EU. That's my understanding. Is that right, Shalini?
Yes, I would be sending them a re-engagement email blanket. This is a really good time to cull. I know that there is a fear or a reluctance to do that because, people don't want their list to shrink. But this is a really good time to introduce your new privacy policy and your new procedures around consent and invite people to renew their vows with you, if you will. And if they don't want to, then take them off your list. Simple as that. So to Melior's question, does she need, do I need separate consent for net? You've answered that. I have 5 opt-ins, you've answered that. Could I have 2 tick boxes in the first opt-in email so they can choose the nurture sequence or the newsletter or both? So don't bother trying to separate the EU. Yeah, you can do that, but you must not let the unidentified IP addresses fall by the wayside on something like that. You still have to be very vigilant about where people are from on your IP list. But I would treat each campaign separately. I would not be putting multiple tick boxes. I think that confuses people. And I think in the end, the GDPR is designed to allow for consent with clarity. Mm-hmm. It's not there to confuse people with multiple tick boxes and consent options.
Okay, and I just want to talk to that before we go to Melior's next question, which is, I would also say, Melior's, we want lowest bar for people to come in. Then in the nurture sequence, we ask for approval to get onto the newsletter. I think if again, it's otherwise it's a bit of a double header. And as Shalini says, it creates confusion, but it can also go, oh, too much too soon. Remember, email marketing is all about relationship. And for me to come to your opt-in for the first time, I want to dip my toe in the water with you. And in the new world, it's going to be, well, I really just want to tip my toe into the new water with you, and then I'll decide if I want to be on your newsletter or not. And I think the Europeans will probably be fairly vigilant around that as well, if they feel they've got that. Mel, no, don't apologise for your questions. I love them. They're really, really good. So that the next question is, what if I get GDPR level consent form from everyone, no matter where they're from? Shalini, your views on that?
That's fine. I think that's the way people are moving into the future, that if you comply with the GDPR once and for all, it is the highest level privacy requirement in the world today. So if you comply with GDPR across all your email communications, you're safe. It is what I would do. I wouldn't even bother segmenting now, I would just make sure that I'm GDPR compliant with everybody. I will assume that everybody lives in the EU.
Yep, absolutely. And I think with that, if I'm a customer sitting on the other end of that, I'd say, well, great, you're compliant with the highest level. If you can actually turn this to your advantage, you can say, yes, we do really, like, in the bottom of the opt-in forms, we treat your information as privately, we would never spam you. This is, you could say GDPR compliant. You could actually turn this to your advantage as opposed to seeing it as a negative.
And Karen is right. It is on the onus is on the business owners. I now think the time has come to view your business as being accessible to anybody.
Yep, I agree.
And if the GDPR is at the top level requirement of privacy information control for individuals, then you must seek to comply with that. You will, as a business owner anyway, you would always want to comply with the highest level of compliance, with the highest authority or regulation in your industry. The GDPR applies to all industries. It's not, does not leave anyone out.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just mindful of time. A couple of things we wanted to cover off before we left. If anyone's got any other questions, would you like to drop them into the chat? I just had 2 other questions that I want to ask, because they're questions that came to my mind after I'd read your checklist, Shalini, and I just think that people may have these same questions themselves when they see the checklist. The first one was, you mentioned in your checklist about advising of a data breach.
Yes.
Is something you could just give us a bit of a laser focus on that? I'm going to ask about that and about business insurance.
So if you become aware that there has been a data breach, in Australia, that comes into play with the recent data breach notification regulations, which meant that you needed to have a process in place in the event you become aware of a data breach. So in the past, you could just say, well, we're not liable. We may have a data breach, but we don't know about it. So because we didn't know about it, we're sorry. Now, if you become aware of a data breach, there's a number of things that you have to do. You have to inform the privacy. So it first has to fall within the category of a notifiable breach. Once it falls within that category, then there is a process where you have to notify the commissioner and show a number of things that will need to be done. One of which is to contact the person who owns that information, particularly if they have been harmed by that breach in any way. So that is what in terms of the GDPR, there is a requirement that it's about notifying of a potential breach and then investigating, not investigating and then notifying.
Right.
Yeah. So is that what you meant?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So it's really to keep people proactive in maintaining the integrity of their processes.
And I think the takeout I take from that, and I'm sort of aware of time, is that really if we're doing all the things we're talking about today, we're not going to be in this situation. It's only if our email list is somehow breached elsewhere. Is that correct?
Yes, and also if your email list is breached, say through your processes, which could be mail, because that's what data transfer means. There's a lot of this word data transfer bandied around. Data transfer is when where our processes are located, we're in fact engaging in a transfer of data from our control to the processor's control.
Mm-hmm.
So previously, you know, you wouldn't really kind of focus on data transfer because the list was in your account with MailChimp or whatever, and there was a perception that that's where it stayed, and actually you have to look to see where that provider is located and what so if they're located in the EU, in the US, there's a different privacy. They have the privacy shield, which they need to comply with, and which it's a whole different compliance for the processors. If they're located in the EU, so they're owned and operated out of the EU, the data processors, then they are bound by the GDPR.
Okay. I think I'm not wanting to overwhelm people with that. I think maybe if we've got
that's like getting to that. You don't need to know that stuff. I don't deal with it in the clientele that I deal with.
Excellent.
So
we'll leave it at that. You also mentioned on the checklist checking business insurance. So I'm assuming that's about calling your insurer and checking you've got the policies that I might calling my business insurer and saying, "Hi, is my policy going to cover me now for GDPR?" Is that correct?
Yes. Well, I think it's what you firstly. Make sure you have business insurance.
Mm-hmm.
In this space. It's one of those things that fall by the wayside. And secondly, your insurers might require you to have GDPR compliant documentation in place in order to approve insurance.
Okay, so this is where the privacy.
Just be aware of that, yeah.
Okay, that's good. So to get the insurance, great. That's really good. All right. Well, I think we've had some really good questions, really great discussion today. Shalini, I want to say thank you very much for your time. I just wanted to let everybody know, I guess, two things moving forward. The email workshop this Thursday is going to be the next level from this workshop. So just because you've attended this, it doesn't mean you don't need to attend that. We're going to go into a lot more detail. I'm going to explain to you some principles and ways that you can do things. So I just wanted to encourage you to come to that workshop on Thursday. The next thing, though, was that Shalini has very kindly offered an opportunity for members of this group in terms of assistance with the privacy policy. And I just wanted to throw to you, Shalini, just to explain that a little bit in terms of what's available to people.
Okay, so I draft privacy policy, GDPR compliant privacy policies, and I've been doing them now for businesses usually outside the groups mainly, but now I realize, the demand or the request has come from within the group. So the GDPR compliant privacy policies are tailored to your business. I do need information about how you're doing your online, your online presence and your marketing in order to inform the document itself. So you have the links that I have given Jen 2 links. One is to have a chat with me if you need to maybe cover some of the stuff we've covered today that you didn't get, or if you want more information. And the second one is if you were on this call and you wanted a privacy policy, I have made a special offer for a custom drafted privacy policy for the people that have partaken in today's workshop. So,
do you want to just explain that, what's available there, Shalini?
Oh, okay. So the link that Jen will send out is a link for the discounted one. I normally charge $440 to draft a GDPR compliant privacy policy. It's a lot different from the Australian privacy policy framework, and for this particular group of people that have shown an interest in learning about the GDPR, I have provided a discount. So the link will lead you to booking the drafting for your GDPR compliant privacy policy for $396, not the full price.
So that's a really great opportunity for everyone. I just thought I had the link and I don't, so I'm just grabbing that up again and I'll put that in there. But it is a really great opportunity for you to get this. Shalini is, as you can see, is very experienced. She understands, she's been through this in great detail. She and I've discussed this, she's already drafted many privacy policies already. So you're getting her full attention on this. The other thing too is this is not a templating approach. Shalini's just not grabbing a template and saying, here it is with your details. She's going through each one personally and really drafting for your needs. And the reason is that she's making sure that she's really across all of this. So this is a great opportunity that I would really encourage you to look at. We're all going to need this. So it's a great chance for you to have a look at that there as well. So, and as you can see, Shalini's exceptionally all over this one. And I think she's a great person to have on your team as your legal advisor generally. Today we can see she's very clear, very to the point, and really understand which end is up from a legal perspective. So I like to have people like that on my team who really know what they're talking about and that are trustworthy and reliable. So really encourage you to have a look at that. Are there any other questions at all? If people can come off mute if you like, if there's any other questions that you might have, any questions about that opportunity there with Shalini as well, would love to talk with you about those as well right now.
I just have one thing to say. I think I'll put in the 6 lawful purposes in the chat of the event.
Great.
Okay, because I have had so much on my mind with this GDPR that I cannot remember. If I can't remember the 6 off the top of my head, that really worries me. So, but I'll put this, what my take on it is in the group, in the event chat, in case it's not in great detail that I imagined it is in the checklist. Because the checklist is a checklist, it's not meant to sit you there for 2 days with gravitate from a coffee to an alcoholic drink because it's so complex. The purpose of my checklist was for you to get an idea of whether it is you need help or you don't. It's as simple as that.
Yes, and I'm just thinking I might put in the link for the checklist as well. I'll just check that I've got that because it is really, I don't seem to have the link. Oh, I've got a,
I'll give you the link. Just give me a minute.
I'm going to put that into the chat.
Yeah.
And I love your comment, gravitate from into an alcoholic drink. Yes, I think this could make a few of us do that. So let's manage all of that as well. I want to also, I'm just going to go and check in the Facebook group just because there was no other questions that we had. I think we're pretty all over it. But I want to thank you everyone today for your attendance. I think the comment we made earlier is, you are really standing up. You really are leveling up your business in a very serious way. This is great customer engagement. It is about risk management. It's about, being serious about your business. So I really want to congratulate you all for being here and participating in this because it's not everyone attends, but it's those of us who do get focused on these things that and that really make an effort. It makes all the difference. So it's really, really good that you are here. I am just checking the event in my group on my phone, which sometimes it doesn't show me. Here we go. I'll just check any questions. I thought there was one question from Josh Oakey, but I can't seem to see it. But I think Josh's question has been answered. So here we go. The comments are here. Yes, that Josh question has been answered. I think we've covered all of the others. Melios, you had some great questions. Okay. So yes, I think the other thing is that Melios' question is, what are the consequences risk if you haven't complied by 25 May? This is going to be policed. We do need to just have those things in place, but we've given you a step-by-step approach. So hopefully that will be worthwhile. So Shalini has put in the compliance checklist there. You can have a look at that. And Shalini, what shall I do? Shall I keep the meeting open for you just to put those notes into the chat? Or would you like to just put those?
I'll put it into the event because I think it's important for everybody. And look, generally speaking, that's the lawful purpose is something that lawyers will look at to see whether the reason for collecting the information is sufficient. But I think it's handy to have an idea of it for yourself as a practitioner. I need to go back into my checklist. I'm pretty good, but I'm not that amazing that I know every section of my checklist.
That's right.
I did it while I was on holidays, and I tell you, it was just, I don't know. I probably need to look at it again. So I'll put it into the event and hopefully it'll be all good.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. I really like it. All right, everyone. Well, we'll make that a wrap on today. If there's no other questions. Judy, you were right. You didn't have any other questions at all? You're all good. All right. So I wanted to say thank you and congratulations to all of you for attending. Those links are there and that opportunity there with Shalini is fantastic. So I really encourage you to take that on board. So you take care and we'll look forward to seeing you on Thursday for workshop
John, just send me a link. Just go in the link and send me a message. I'll deal with your privacy policy, no problem.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. I'm just answering his message on the chat. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you all stepping in and coming and educating yourselves about this. It makes my heart, makes me feel like I'm doing some kind of useful work.
You definitely are. You definitely are. And that's great, John, that you're keen to get that sorted. That's great. All right, everyone, take care and we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right. Bye. Bye-bye.